UFC 203 was this past weekend in Cleveland, Ohio, with a crowd of nearly 19,000 inside the Quicken Loans Arena in downtown Cleveland. I was one of those people in attendance watching UFC 203, which had 5 fights shown on the pay-per-view main card. Before I get to those fights, however, I want to take a quick look at the 5 undercard matchups. A couple of pretty good finishes, including Yancy Medeiros, who debuted in the UFC's welterweight division after fighting the majority of his UFC career at 155 pounds. He was able to submit Sean Spencer in the second round, netting him one of the Performance of the Night bonuses. It was a good performance by Medeiros. He looked good at 170 pounds. He landed a very nice high kick to the head that sent Spencer reeling. He was then able to swing around, take the back, and sink in the rear naked choke there in the second round to defeat Sean Spencer. So a really nice win for him. Also a very nice win for Drew Dober, as he was able to knock out UFC newcomer Jason Gonzalez, who was on the McGregor-Faber season of The Ultimate Fighter not too long ago. And Dober, normally a guy that really likes to out-wrestle his opponents, looked really good against a much bigger and taller Jason Gonzalez. Had no problem getting on the inside, was landing a lot of combinations, and Gonzalez just never was able to establish that range, and it was kind of only a matter of time, I felt, that Dober was either going to get a big takedown and lead to a finish, or land something big on the inside like he did, that big right, and he was able to do that nice combination there to get the finish, 145 in the first round. Nick Lentz was able to take out injury replacement Michael McBride, who had about 2 weeks' notice to fill in here. Lentz at 155, at least in this fight, I don't know if it was the change in opponent or if he had a tough weight cut, which you wouldn't think would be the issue. Again, now fighting at 155 once again, as opposed to fighting at featherweight where he was for a while. He just looked off. Yeah, he beat a guy that probably wasn't quite ready for this fight, maybe not skill-wise, well, skill-wise as well as time-wise, too, taking this fight on short notice, and also it being his UFC debut, that being Michael McBride. And I don't know, Nick Lentz, yeah, he got the finish, but he just looked a little off in this fight, so I don't know if there was something kind of lingering with him, but yeah, he looked a little off, but got the job done. Second round knockout at 417. Brad Tavares against Chiao Magalesh. Solid fight. First round, not a lot happened. Really much in the second either, but Tavares was able to have a really good third round. I thought really started to open up in that third round, either realizing that he needed to go for a finish or needed that round to win the fight. And really, Magalesh he's credited with officially one takedown, but Tavares popped right back up. If this fight was going to stay standing, it was going to be hard for Magalesh to outstrike Brad Tavares, who's a really good point fighter in terms of his stand-up skills. So when it got to the feet, it was going to be hard for Magalesh to do that, and Tavares stepped up in the third round, outstruck Magalesh 29-14 in that final frame, and was a little surprised at the split decision, but the judges did get it right overall in giving Tavares the victory there. Kind of a sad here, of course, as many fans know, Jessica is a friend of the show. Of course, she was fighting in her hometown for the first time in a long time, first time in the UFC against Betch Kahea. A lot of animosity between the two. If you see the weigh-in clips, obviously Jessica, I believe, pushed Kahea. This fight was supposed to happen a few months ago. It didn't happen, so Jessica didn't let that animosity go. And obviously, being in Cleveland, she really wanted to perform there, but just fell a little bit short. That's pretty much been the story of her UFC career, just falling a little bit short. And first round was pretty even, but Jessica was definitely controlling the center of the ring, cage rather, and in my opinion took that first round. The second round, very close. Possibly could have called it a 9-9 round, but probably would have gave it to Betch. I thought she landed the better strikes, or at least the more impactful strikes, despite being 0 for 3 on takedowns. And round 3, I thought both of them really needed to pick it up. I thought Kahea just did a little bit better job in that third round, so I'm not surprised that she ended up edging out the split decision, much to the dismay of the crowd there in Cleveland. As I'm not sure how it came across on the FS1 broadcast, but at least where I was sitting, you could not hear anything that Joe was asking Betch or anything that Betch was saying back to Joe Rogan in that post-fight interview. It was insane how loud the crowd was in supporting their hometown girl there in Jessica Evil Eye, who may be on her way out of the organization, but hopefully she'll get back on her feet. We'll see her back fighting somewhere soon if it's not the UFC. But tough loss there for Jessica, and obviously the fans were not happy about that. Heading into the main card, though, 5 fights, as I said, were shown on the main card. And just real quickly, 2 fights that got canceled. Ray Borg had a illness just days before the fight. Once again, Ian McCall got a fight canceled, so that was one fight that was canceled. And then right after the weigh-ins, the night before the fight, CB Dalloway was in an elevator with some of the other fighters for UFC 203. Something happened when the elevator stopped. He took a spill and apparently messed up his back, and he didn't feel like he would be 100% for his fight there in Cleveland. So that fight was a last-minute cancellation. So it got moved from 12 to 10 fights in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And the elevator thing, really weird because no one else on the elevator got hurt. So I don't know. I don't know what that means. I don't know if CB Dalloway's was scared or I don't know. It just seems kind of odd that no one else got hurt. That's the only odd thing about it. It's also odd that it was an elevator. That's a weird thing. So I don't know. Yeah, definitely a bizarre story. If you want to read more about it, I'm sure it's on Sheerdog or Junkie or something. But yeah, I guess it's reminiscent to the Hennebrow losing to the bathtub thing. Maybe this is more bizarre. CB Dalloway losing to the elevator. Getting to the main card, the first fight of the evening was in the women's strawweight division as Jessica Andrade took on Joanne Calderwood, a matchup of 2 top 10 strawweight fighters. And this fight kind of went how I thought it would be. If Joanne Calderwood would not be able to keep this fight at range, and if Jessica was able to get inside either the land powerful strikes or take Calderwood down, it could be a short night for Joanne Calderwood. And that's what happened as Andrade was able to get inside with relatively ease, landed 2 takedowns on Calderwood, kept up the pressure with strikes as she outstruck the Scotswoman 44-23 inside the first round, and ultimately was able to drop down for a guillotine choke and got Calderwood to tap there at 4:38 into the first round. And another dominant performance in the strawweight weight class. This marks her 2nd straight victory in this division, the 115 division, as she took out another top contender, formerly title challenger Jessica Penne. She beat in her last fight, and now she'd taken out Joanne Calderwood in the first round. I think she's one fight away from a title shot. I really do. I think that she is an absolute animal and will give whoever comes out of Kowalkiewicz and Jacek a run for their money. And I think a matchup with former title holder Carla Esparza, I think, would be a perfect #1 contenders match. Carla is coming off a win in her last fight since her return. I believe that was back in April. So with this fight, obviously Andrade took very little damage in this matchup. So I think Carla, who I believe is ranked #2 behind Claudia Gadelha, I think that's the matchup to make for a #1 contender there. But we'll see. Well, it depends what the UFC wants to do. But I think that's a great fight. And if she beats Carla, who's only lost to Joanna in her whole entire career, I think that's deserving of a title shot. The next fight of the evening was in the bantamweight division as former WEC champion Uriah Faber took on one of the rising prospects in the bantamweight division in Jimmy Rivera. In this fight, I saw 2 things. One thing I saw was Jimmy Rivera fighting an almost flawless fight. He took what Uriah Faber gave him. He was giving him leg kicks. He was given opportunities to move in and out with short, precise, straight punches and combinations. He saw everything Faber was coming at him. He avoided almost everything Faber threw at him, not just takedowns, but punches and strikes as well. And he didn't overextend himself and get himself into any trouble where Faber could capitalize with either takedowns or strikes. This was a nearly flawless performance. Now, the reason it was so good is because Faber a guy notoriously good hand speed, good takedowns, was just shut down in every single category, and it just seemed like he couldn't do anything to muster up any offense of this fight. I mean, he landed a total of 23 strikes out of 113 thrown. That's awful. That is a horrible rate. And he was 0 for 4 on takedowns. Now, sure, Jimmy Rivera didn't attempt a takedown. 55 of 162 is not exactly an amazing clip in terms of striking, but it still is being way more active than Faber was, and he still landed nearly double of what Faber did. So, in that aspect, it was a perfect fight. Also, the fact that Faber's been around for so long, he's only lost one non-title fight in a gazillion years, and Rivera's had fought nobody of this caliber on a pay-per-view main card. This was a very excellent performance, and this, to me, shows a lot of growth for Jimmy Rivera, who's done nothing but upset people since coming into the UFC. I mean, he wasn't supposed to beat Marcus Brimage in his debut. He wasn't supposed to beat the former RFA champion Pedro Munoz in his next fight. He wasn't supposed to top-rank early Alcantara in his home state of New Jersey in his last fight in January. And he certainly wasn't supposed to beat Uriah Faber in this fight here at UFC 203. With 4 consecutive victories and now a win over Faber, who was ranked number 2 in the whole entire division, he is definitely on a short track for a title shot. I was speaking with Cody No Love, and I threw this on my Twitter. I met him at the meet and greet they had there for the UFC Fan Village hours prior to UFC 203 at the Q, and I kind of said offhand, like, hey, too bad Caraway wouldn't fight you so you could fight here tonight. And he said, yeah, it's all right, though. I'll be fighting for the title next. So if indeed Cody Garbrandt is next for Dominic Cruz in the 135 division, that would put TJ Dillashaw, the former champion, in a possible matchup with Brian Caraway or Jimmy Rivera to determine the number 1 contender. 2 of those 3 are going to face off for a number 1 contender. Eric Perez already booked a fight. I feel like that would have been a good matchup, possibly for Rivera. So just for argument's sake, let's say Dillashaw does fight Caraway for a number 1 contender matchup. That would leave Rivera possibly having to take someone coming off a loss here in late 2016 or early 2017. That would either be Aljamain Sterling, a Rafael Asunciao, a Thomas Almeida, maybe an Anthony Burchak, who I think actually is now coming off a win. He has won since losing to Thomas Almeida. So, possibly, but or possibly he could face the winner coming up here in a few weeks between John Lineker and John Dodson. I think also could be a title eliminator thing too. That could be the 4th guy there. So definitely he puts himself in a very good position here in the bantamweight division, having defeated a guy the caliber of Uriah Faber. The next matchup of the evening for UFC 203 was in the welterweight division, as former WWE superstar CM Punk took on Mickey Gall. And I just have to say, a lot of the entrances for this event were pretty awesome. But Mickey Gall coming out to "Oh Mickey, You're So Fine," and then of course CM Punk coming out to his famous song there, or song I guess you could say he made more famous, "Cult to Personality" by Living Colour, was absolutely excellent. It was really cool. So that was cool. But Mickey Gall, who is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and like I said when I was picking this fight, Gall, a relatively unknown, but he's been doing this for a lot longer than CM Punk, so I kind of feel like I had to take Mickey Gall, and he did not disappoint as he took this fight right to the ground, just about right from the get-go. Got the takedown, landed some nasty ground and pound, was able to move around and get a rear naked choke and get the tap there at 2:14 into the first round. People were saying that Punk didn't land a strike. Well, according to Fight Metric, he actually landed 6 of 8. But Mickey Gall landed 26 of 39 with the takedown there. So after the fight, some people were mad that CM Punk got paid $500,000 for this fight. It looks as though CM Punk, I don't know what his contract was with the UFC, whether it was just for one fight, a multi-fight deal. Dana White is saying his next fight probably shouldn't be in the UFC. I think that's fair. They may have a Chris Cyborg situation where he's still under contract with the UFC, but they're allowing him to fight for like somebody like a RFA or something. The guy gave it a shot. It didn't work out for him. I feel like there's a lot of hate towards him, that he's earning money he shouldn't deserve, that no other fighter making their MMA debut should be able to make $500,000 and this and that. And at the end of the day, from what I understand, CM Punk didn't seek out this opportunity with the UFC. It was kind of a thing where he got to talking with Dana White. He had been a fan of the sport for a while. They kind of got to talking like, hey, would you want to fight? And he goes, yeah, maybe I want to fight. And then he signed the deal. Anyone that says anything else to me is, I think, false, as far as I can tell. Maybe I'm wrong too, and I'll fully admit it. But this is not something that CM Punk demanded. He didn't demand a UFC contract. He didn't say, I'm going to do MMA, I want to fight for the UFC, I want to make this, I want to make that, do this right now. From what I know and what I've seen in reports out there, that's not how this went down. So everybody should throw that out the window. This is not something that he demanded, and if someone's offering you $500,000 to fight your first ever fight in MMA, do it. Who's not taking that offer? So I can't blame him for that. He did the right thing. He didn't do this. He didn't take this fight after 3 months of training. He took just about 2 years to try to work at this before stepping in there. That's a lot of time, basically at that point, making no money. Now, of course, he has money from the WWE, but what I'm saying is he basically went and did this for 2 years on the hopes that he could maybe make the $500,000, that he could get in there and compete. And it didn't work out his way. Mickey Gall is a guy that has a lot of promise. 3-0, all 3 first-round finishes by rear naked choke. He's absolutely huge for this weight class in the welterweight division at 6'2", and he's only 24 years old. He has a lot of promise, and he's already a brown belt at 24 years old. Probably will be getting his black belt pretty soon. So this is a guy that is no slouch, despite this only being his 3rd professional fight. I think this kid definitely has a future, and I'm really interested to see where it goes. So he wanted CM Punk, he got it, and he beat it. So we'll see what's next for him. He's definitely a guy I think that the UFC can build. And for CM Punk, he said he wants to try it again, and I hope he does. He doesn't seem like a guy that gets discouraged too easily, that has a positive outlook on life, and I would like for him to try this again. And I think he should at least fight till he gets a win, and then maybe see where it goes. I mean, this is a guy that's not going to be a world champion in any organization, but if this is what he wants to do with his life for a few more years, so be it. Go ahead and do it. Have some fun. Co-main event of the evening, Fabricio Verdum against Travis Browne. What an interesting fight this was. First of all, it started with a huge flying karate kick from Verdum to the face of Travis Browne that somehow did not knock out Travis Browne. He was staggered. From there, Verdum had a very dominant first round, outstriking Browne 60-12. Really was tearing him up on the feet. There was a scramble. He got on top for a little bit, was landing some nice ground and pound. Went around for a choke, but just didn't have it. Going into the second round, looks as though Verdum was poised to get a finish. Actually, let me back up there. Also, midway through the first round, there was a situation where Travis Browne motioned that he had to stop the fight at first. Just from where I was sitting, because again, I was there live in attendance, not listening to the broadcast, it looks as though there may have been something wrong with his glove or the tape with the glove, and I thought initially that's what the fight was being stopped for. He was kind of pointing to his hand. Then the doctor came in, was looking it over, and Gary Copeland, a guy who's a senior official, I mean, if you've watched mixed martial arts for the last 5 to 10 years, you probably have seen Gary Copeland pop up in most of the major organizations. So this is not a guy who doesn't know what he's doing. And for whatever reason, allowed this fight to continue with what was apparently a hand injury, a dislocated finger. You can see the images online of Travis Browne's hand, and let this fight continue. As far as I know, the only way a fight can be stopped and be allowed to continue is due to a cut or an illegal foul. As far as I know, those are the only, or equipment malfunction, whether it was the glove or the mouthpiece. As far as I know, those are the only 3 ways that a fight can be stopped and allowed to continue. Any other injury, how minor, insignificant, or whatever, if you say you got to stop the fight's over. That's it. So this was very bizarre that this fight was allowed to continue after that point. And then in rounds 2 and 3, Brown, whether it was due to that injury or the short notice nature, he was definitely not there. He just looked like a ghost just walking through, and he was able to survive because Fabricio Verdum was playing it safe. He wasn't taking any more chances. He did try 2 takedowns in the next 2 rounds. He failed on both of them, but didn't follow those up. Wasn't really striking much, wasn't overextending himself, and it just felt like after the second round, he was just playing it safe and hoping that if Cain Velasquez gets hurt, who appears as though he'll get the next title shot, gets hurt, which is a very likely scenario, and they tab Fabricio Verdum to replace him, because it just seems like Verdum kind of coasted in those last 2 rounds, and you heard the boos, again, from the fans there in Cleveland, who was having none of it of the former UFC heavyweight champion. Very deafening boos. I get why they were booing. Some fans didn't. Some fans watching, and I saw on social media, didn't like the boos. Thought the crowd was disrespectful. I mean, it was a crap 2 rounds. You can't say that he just mailed in those last 2 rounds. You can't say that he didn't. And Verdum really has no excuse for how he performed in those last 2 rounds. Now, should the fans maybe not booed as loud or as long? Maybe. But I mean, again, they're paying money to see the show, and they didn't like what was presented in those final 10 minutes, so they had all the right to boo that they want. So take that for what you will. Travis Brown may get cut now. I don't know. I mean, he took this fight on short notice. I don't think he should have took it. You could clearly tell that he was not all there for that fight. And the UFC may give him a fight that's not short notice, but he was not there. And Verdum probably gets a matchup with Junior Dos Santos, I would think, next, or possibly a trilogy with Alistair Overeem. I think those would be the 2 options. And I don't know if Rothwell getting hurt has soured him on the idea of fighting Ben Rothwell, but I think that proposed matchup for the co-main event that was supposed to be here in Cleveland would be a good matchup to try to promote again. So we'll see, but Verdum just didn't do himself any favors if his next fight wanting a title shot by mailing in those last 10 minutes. I can tell you that regardless whether you thought the booing was right or not. Main event of the evening, Stipe Miocic against Alistair Overeem. Boy, what a crazy nearly 5 minutes this fight was, as Alistair Overeem was coming out with in the southpaw stance, was throwing an excellent kick to the body with that back left kick, and followed that up with a huge overhand left that was kind of coming from behind his body that Stipe had trouble seeing. He landed that combination, I think, like 3 times in a row. That was the combination that was dropping him. Overeem was able to drop him from those combinations, go around for a choke. It looked as though he had it. It was tight. He said he felt a tap. The replay showed that it didn't appear Stipe tap. Maybe readjust himself, pushing his hand against the body, maybe some small punches, but never officially a tap. Whether that was why Overeem let go of the choke or actually Stipe just gutted through it and did something technical, I don't know. Again, from my vantage point, being up there in the crowd, I could only see so much even on the Jumbotron. So I'll have to go back and watch that myself. But regardless, Stipe was able to come out. Overeem then, I don't know if he gassed himself out or what. Tried those combinations again with that big left overhand, but at that point, Stipe was able to see him coming. He missed 2 or 3 of them. Overeem was really, you probably have seen some of the memes and pictures going around, trying to readjust himself, setting up, running around, quote-unquote, resetting himself. Stipe chased him, was throwing some just nice, clean, precise punches, great combinations right down the middle. Got Overeem twice up against the cage where he was just standing there with his arms up like that. I thought Stipe would go to the body more. I think that maybe prolonged it. I think if he would have ripped a couple to the body, he could have possibly ended this sooner. But nevertheless, after the second time, he kind of backed Overeem up against the cage. Stipe landed the takedown and started to unload on the man from the Netherlands. And after about 5 or 6, you saw the hands go to the side. the heads start to go limp, and he was out as referee. Mark Goddard came in and stopped this one at 4:27 for Stipe Miocic to defend his heavyweight championship and protect the land, as they say in Cleveland there. And he became the first heavyweight champion to defend his title successfully since Cain Velasquez did it at UFC 166. That was nearly 3 years ago in Houston. That's how long it's been since a heavyweight champion has defended his title successfully. So Stipe, a little bit of history there. First ever UFC fight in Cleveland, sold-out crowd. He did it there. The crowd reaction was absolutely insane, even louder than the boos there. The reception he got after the fight, while he was walking out there, and obviously the reception Jessica got was incredible. So I've seen the highs and lows of the crowd there, but I think it's safe to say I think the UFC will be back in Cleveland. I think they should come back. Quicken Loans is an excellent arena. The city is great now. I mean, things have, as weird as it sounds, things have really picked up there since the Cavs have kind of brought a new life and energy into the city there, and it's a nice downtown area. Obviously, Ohio has had 4 UFC champions. Their events have done very well attendance-wise, so I see no reason why they shouldn't come back to Cleveland relatively soon. So congrats to Stipe Miocic there on the win, and for Overeem kind of back to the drawing board there. I don't know if he has another title run in him. I know he's 38 years old, but I don't know. I hate to say he gassed out, but it just seemed like for a 5-round fight that he should have had a lot more in there. So I don't know if there was a lingering injury. I mean, I talked to him before the fight. He said he felt sharp. He said he felt good. So I don't know what it was, but yeah, he had an opportunity to finish the fight, didn't. Stipe took advantage of that and finished the fight himself there.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham, and joining me today on the line, we have a special guest. He is fresh off his victory over Jason Gonzalez at UFC 203. He is Drew Dober. And Drew, thanks for coming on Beyond the Cage.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man.
Want to start off first here with your fight at UFC 203. Before you even got into the octagon, of course, you came out to the shoot there. A lot of people got a chuckle out of that, enjoyed that. Was that your idea, or did someone else kind of plant that in your head?
Oh, it was definitely my idea. I definitely like coming out to goofy songs with a good dance beat. I'm already fighting somebody in a cage, so I got enough testosterone going, so I needed something to put a smile on my face and get the rhythm going.
Now, of course, there were a lot of good walkouts, including yours. Of course, CM Punk came out to his infamous Cult of Personality. Mickey Gall came out to Oh, Mickey, You're So Fine. Overeem coming out to the Pride song. Do you feel like yours kind of set the tone for the rest of the night in terms of walkout songs?
I don't know. I mean, I dig Shoop, and I dig my own walkout, but Mickey Gall and his walkout was pretty fantastic too. So I think him and I are tied.
All right, let's get to the action that happened inside the octagon there in Cleveland. Despite taking on a much bigger and taller opponent, you seem to have no problem getting on the inside, landing powerful punches for the majority of that round. Were you surprised at how easy you were able to get inside the pocket there? Watching film and some of his previous fights, I knew he was an aggressive fighter. So for being 6'2", he definitely moved forward quite a bit. It actually fit well with my game. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but this was your first knockout victory since 2010. So did that kind of surprise you? It's been that long since you knocked someone out?
I mean, my record shows like tons of submissions. But statistically, yes, since 2010. However, a lot of submissions that I've had have come from knocking, one person down or knocking an opponent down, and then just taking the easy win from there. So, yeah, I mean, I'm satisfied that the record will now show a KO or TKO. But yeah, it doesn't bother me too much.
Now, did he do anything in this fight to surprise you at all?
No, I think I've been around long enough that it's very rare for me to be surprised. So, no, not at all.
Now, was there anything you felt you did wrong in what was a relatively flawless victory there for you?
I kicked him in the cup. that was unfortunate for the audience, him and I. So yeah, that was incredibly wrong.
Besides that, though, anything like technically that I don't know if you've gone back and watched it, but anything technical that you thought that maybe you had to work on or need to work on?
Yeah, I think my elbows could have stayed a little tighter. I could have landed a little bit more punches. I think I missed quite a bit. So, and then yeah, I think overall I did a good job of kind of calming myself down or not trying to rush a situation. But as soon as I turned it on and then went for the knockout, my mistakes started coming out. So there's always stuff to improve on, but overall I'm pretty satisfied with my performance.
This is now your second win in a row here in 2016. You won back in January, and of course now here in Cleveland. Are you trying to fight one more time before the end of the year, or are you going to kind of relax and enjoy the holidays here coming up?
I mean, ideally, I would have had 3 victories this year, but the last go-around in April didn't work out to my favor. But yeah, I'm actually extremely interested in getting another one in this year. I got a couple injuries that I would like healing up, immediately. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to possibly fighting, late November, early December, and have something else to celebrate right before Christmas.
Now, is there any opponent in particular that you would like to take on next, or just whatever Sean Shelby gives you there?
I think, yeah, just whatever, the matchmakers of the UFC give me. I'm more interested in having another, exciting fight. So, whoever, could stand in front of me and, achieve fight of the night with me, that'd be fantastic.
Now, of course, your brother-in-law just fought just about a week ago there, Nick Hein. He was victorious there over Bang in his native Hamburg, Germany. What did you think about Nick's performance over there?
Oh, good. Yeah, he made a move to Los Angeles with Anthony Hardonk, and in this fight in particular, he showed a lot more comfort in the stand-up department. Showed a lot more improvement. So I think if he sticks with that team, then we'd see a lot of improvement from him, and he'll also gain more comfort as far as being with this camp and stuff. So I was definitely impressed with his performance, and it definitely motivated me to get my debut.
I want to get back to Cleveland there. A lot of people were one way or the other in terms of the way the crowd reacted at certain points, like booing Pechikea, booing Fabricio Verdum, but obviously they had a lot of positive reactions for CM Punk. Obviously the 2 hometown favorites there in Stipe Miocic and Jessica Ai. Oh, what did you feel about the crowd there in Cleveland?
I thought the crowd was fantastic. I mean, I personally loved Cleveland, before the fight, during the fight, and even after the fight. I think Cleveland itself is a very sports-driven community, and so yes, they showed a lot of support for their hometown people. The place was just packed, even for the prelims, which is you rarely see in Las Vegas. So I think overall, man, the excitement, the energy, and the participation from the crowd was just fantastic.
Looking at some of the other action that happened there on the night, getting back to the CM Punk and Mickey Gall. Is that kind of what you expected, that Gall was going to win pretty easily, or do you think CM was going to put up more of a fight?
I'm horrible at calling fights, and so I have stopped expecting stuff. But unfortunately, being part of this game, I know how much training and dedication and sacrifices it takes to be in the sport, and especially to be in the UFC. And unfortunately, with the minimal time that CM Punk had, it unfortunately showed in his performance. I mean, you had to give it to him for stepping in the cage and trying to fight on the top, the biggest level right out the gate. But unfortunately, I just know that it takes a lot more than just a couple months to achieve greatness at the highest stage.
Now, looking at the co-main event, Fabricio Verdum against Travis Brown. Have you ever seen a fight where a guy says he's hurt and then the fight somehow still continues? Did that kind of blow your mind?
I think I've seen it once before. I significantly remember there was another UFC fight where the guy tried to call a timeout, and it was just like a huge uproar. It's like you can't call a timeout in a fight. even though it's your hand or your foot, or if I got punched in the face and my nose broke, I can't say like, oh, hold on, I wasn't ready, And the fight could have went a different way, but the referee does his job, and we can talk about it, but it happened the way it was supposed to happen.
Now, getting to the main event, of course, what a back-and-forth battle for all just about 5 minutes that it happened. It looked like Overeem had him rocked close to a submission. Stipe grits it out. He comes back, lands some nice combinations, takes him down, and then knocks him out with the crowd going insane. What did you think about that first round finish there by Stipe?
Man, those heavyweights can just like sneeze and knock each other down. They have so much mass moving around. But personally, I think it was unfortunate we saw kind of like I would say a sloppier version of Alistair Overeem. I significantly remember him a lot more sharper and a lot more athletic, and so I don't know what his deal was, but I think I was rooting for Stipe, and so it was good to see the hometown guy get his victory in Cleveland and retain his title, and I look forward to seeing him do good things. I know he's a humble guy, a great person, trains really hard, so it's always good to see the good person come out with the win.
After the fight, Joe Rogan mentioned on Twitter and kind of pleaded to Dana White and some of the top UFC brass that they should probably not interview guys after getting knocked out, because it seemed like Overeem maybe wasn't all there when talking with Joe post-fight. Do you agree with those sentiments to maybe let guys that just got knocked out have a few minutes and interview them, later on when they've gotten checked out and everything?
I've always been a firm believer that you should never hand a fighter a microphone after the fight, whether it was a win or a loss. We're so hyped up with adrenaline and excitement, and you see fighters like cry and or just say stupid stuff or mumbling, or with me, I'm always like yelling into the mic for no reason because I'm like super excited. So you're definitely setting these competitors up for failure, immediately putting a camera and a mic in their hands.
Now, I want to ask you this because this is maybe one of the more bizarre ways that a fighter has had to injure out of a fight, that being CB Dalloway, who was in the fighter hotel there just hours after weigh-ins with some of the other fighters in Cleveland. Something happened with the elevator, and he hurt his back, and he couldn't continue. Is that how crazy is that?
That's absolutely crazy and scary. I can't imagine dropping one or two stories inside a closed container right after weigh-ins. That's just scary business. But they only had 3 elevators and at least 30, 40, 50 people trying to use these 3 elevators. I was lucky enough that my wife and my coach was just fed up with the wait and used the stairs, so they didn't even get on the elevator. But that's just extremely scary, and I hope something gets done about that.
So is it safe to say if the UFC goes back to Cleveland, they're not going to use that hotel anymore?
Hopefully lightning does not strike the same place twice, and so it'd probably preferable if you use the same hotel because they've already dealt with that problem.
All right, Drew, I'll get you out of here with this. Of course, upcoming is a big Marvel movie. I don't know if you're into him or not, but I'm going to ask you here, is Doctor Strange. Are you interested in the Doctor Strange movie, and do you like the superhero movies?
All right, well, you're definitely hitting the bullseye on this one. I absolutely love superhero movies. I think the reason I became a fighter is because I wanted to be a superhero. And so, yeah, Doctor Strange. I'm more of a Marvel, than DC. Doctor Strange, I'm interested in it, yes. But I definitely want to see kind of how they take it, how they use it, where it goes. I'm always kind of questionable when it comes to these, comic movies. I was pleasantly surprised of Suicide Squad. I was very critical on how they're going to use the Joker and what that's going to be about. But, yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised, with the Suicide Squad. So I know it's a good time being a, comic book nerd and all these movies coming out.
All right, he is Drew Dober. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram. It's just his name, @DrewDober. And Drew, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and I hope to have you on later again this year when you fight again.
Thank you so much.
Once again, that was Drew Dober right here on Beyond the Cage.
UFC Fight Night Hidalgo will happen in Hidalgo, Texas this Saturday on Fox Sports 1, September 17th, featuring 6 fights on the main card. The first fight of the evening is in the featherweight division as Maximo Blanco will take on Chaz Skelly. Looking at Blanco, he lost his last fight earlier this year in Boston, and that was to Luke Sanders, getting submitted in the first round by Luke. That snapped a 3-fight winning streak for Blanco, who had wins over the likes of Andy Ogle, Dan Hooker, and Mike De La Torre, most recently as of July 2015. Overall, in the UFC, he has a career record of 4 wins and 4 losses. And looking at Chaz Skelly, he just had a winning streak snapped in his last fight, losing to Darren Elkins in March of this year. He had won 4 in a row from August of 2014 to November of 2015, winning 3 of those 4 fights by knockout with an overall record of 4-2 in the UFC. I think this is an interesting fight. Both guys were on nice win streaks. They got beat. For Blanco, he got beat by a relatively unknown guy in Luke Saunders, whereas Skelly went up against a perennial top 10 featherweight there in Darren Elkins, who's known for grinding out his opponents, has beaten a lot of the lower-level guys in the division, but hasn't really able to beat anybody elite. So definitely a learning experience for both guys, but one thing Skelly has a lot of other featherweights don't have is size. Standing 5'11", he's arguably the biggest guy in this division when you look at the Venezuelan Blanco, who I believe is only listed at 5'7", if memory serves me correctly. So I expect both fighters to want to stand and throw. I think it's going to be a wild fight. I think it's going to be fun, and I think we're going to see a finish. Both guys definitely like to bring the action, and I think are both are looking to prove something. I mean, losing their last fights after having a win streak, they definitely have to be chomping at the bit here to get a victory. So I expect a pretty good fight between these two, and I think it will be an excellent fight to kick off the card. And really, technically, I'd say Blanco's probably a little better of a striker, but I would say Chaz Skelly's probably a little better all around. He has a lot more finishes in other areas other than knockout. So he's a guy who I think can do some more things. And I think the size difference is going to be something to come out with, as Blanco will be giving up 3 inches in height. He's actually 5'8". But the one thing, they started doing the leg reach, which they have listed on the UFC website, a 42-inch leg reach to just 37 for Blanco. So obviously he won't have to be, he'll have to get inside really to kick him. And that could be a difference in this fight. A weird thing like that for a guy that's really aggressive and standing, that Skelly doesn't have to move too far to kick him or have to go up as high with kicks to land a head kick. So I think Blanco, how I maybe see this fight is Blanco kind of rushing in, maybe doing something, being too aggressive, and the bigger Kelly either taking him down after gassing out, that being Blanco, getting a submission, or him being able to catch him coming in with a powerful punch, being the bigger guy. Or maybe Blanco is able to put him away, get him before he's able to even touch him with anything. So I think it's a good fight to kick off the card, because the next one, I don't know, could be boring. And that's no offense to these two gentlemen here at 155, but they're definitely more of a grinding style, especially with Chris Wade as he takes on Islam Makhachev, if I said that correctly, the Russian, with a 12-1 overall record there against Wade, who is 11-2. Wade definitely one of the bright prospects here for the UFC at 155 pounds. Has looked pretty dominant so far in his UFC tenure. As I mentioned, 11-2 overall in his career, 7 of 11 wins by submissions. He did, however, lose his last fight to Rustam Khabilov back in May of this year at the Overeem Orlovsky Fight Night in the Netherlands. That snapped a 3-fight, or actually a 4-fight UFC winning streak, and that was actually Wade's first loss in a couple of years here, as I believe he has not lost since 2012. Let me double check that. But nevertheless, the loss there, Wade's first in a while. Islam Makhachev here for Russia. I don't know a lot about this guy. I'm pretty sure I've seen him fight before. I just can't place the event. But if he's anything like a lot of these other Russians, probably good at sambo, good in the clinch, a guy that should be able to possibly neutralize the takedowns there of Chris Wade, and that's what he's known for. So far, just a 1-1 record for Makhachev. He won his UFC debut in May of last year against Leo Kuntz, and then he got knocked out in the first round against Adriano Martins in October of last year. So it's been nearly a year since we've seen Islam inside the octagon, and Adriano Martins is an absolute monster, so that's no shame there losing too, and that was his first ever career loss, the Russian there out of Dagestan. And I don't know, he's going to have his work cut out for him. Chris Wade, despite losing his last fight to another fellow Russian, you would think having a second consecutive fight against someone of a very similar style would really help him. And the fact that it's been a long layoff for Makhachev, I would say that bodes well for the American Chris Wade. The interesting aspect of this fight is how long either will want to stand with each other, because I think that is a very intriguing aspect. Both are, I would say, are more of a grappling style fighter, and is really, to me, who's going to oppose their will in the other. So I think this fight won't be quite as entertaining as the first one. It's going to be a lot more technical. So if you like technical grappling battles, especially inside the clinch, I think that's what we're going to get here with Chris Wade against Islam. Juan Canero against Kenny Robertson is our next matchup here in the welterweight division. Robertson 15-3, 20-10 for the Brazilian Canero. Canero has fought most of his career at middleweight. I believe Robertson has spent some time at middleweight as well. This fight at welterweight. The last fight there for Robertson was a loss to Ben Saunders. That was all the way back in July of last year. That loss to Saunders snapped a 3-fight winning streak inside the UFC. So far since July of 2012, that kind of restarted his UFC tenure. He actually lost to Mike Pierce in February of 2011, left the organization, knocked out Licio Linares just a few months later, and then was back in the UFC the following year where he lost to Aaron Simpson. But since that loss to Aaron Simpson, he has won 4 of 6 bouts. Obviously lost a close fight there to Ben Saunders back in July, so kind of a long layoff for Robertson, 9-15 wins by submission. For Canero, as I said, has fought some of his career in the middleweight division, has an overall record of 20-10, and despite that, really is not that much bigger than Robertson. These dudes are very similar in height and stature, so probably a good move here for Canero, moving down to 170 pounds. And for Canero, obviously, definitely a jiu-jitsu guy. Obviously, Ben Saunders was able to have some success in beating Robertson, so that's an area that I believe that Canero will have to exploit, or at least try to exploit, in this matchup. Canero has had fallen on tough times recently, losing 3 out of his last 4 fights. His lone victory in his last 4 came over Mark Munoz back in February of last year when he submitted Munoz in the first round, and that probably prompted, especially then getting knocked out by Derek Brunson earlier this year in the first round. Those losses probably prompted the move here down the middleweight, which I think is a good move, to be honest. He was towards the bottom end of the top 15 there in middleweight, but I think that was a good move by him, dropping down. This is an interesting fight because I'm not really sure what to expect. Neither guy's like super flashy. Yeah, they have some finishes, but it's really hard to predict. I think if Canero can turn this into a jiu-jitsu match, he's going to have pretty good odds at winning. But if it stays standing in the clinch, I would say Robertson has a better chance. Obviously, Canero has been knocked out recently. I don't know if that will help. Robinson's not a huge knockout guy. He does have some knockouts to his credit, but not really something that he's known for. I would say he's probably a little better standing up, but Canelo does have some good leg kicks if he isn't able to get the fight to the ground, and that could change things too. So this one, I'm not quite sure how this one's really going to play out, to be honest. I feel like both guys are kind of well-rounded. They're evenly matched. And really, besides the jiu-jitsu game of Canelo, that's the only thing I would really say that really stands out to me, and definitely is the thing to look out for in this match. If Canelo can do that, he can get a win here in Texas. Next fight of the evening will be in the lightweight division, as Evan Dunham will take on a newcomer to the UFC. He is the former World Series of Fighting featherweight champion, and that's going to be Rick Glenn. Rick Glenn, an awfully impressive record, 18-3-1. However, as I just said, featherweight champion. This match will be contested at 155 pounds. I'm sure Glenn has fought somewhere in his career at 155, but obviously when he's been making his name, when he became the World Series of Fighting featherweight champion, that obviously was 10 pounds lower. So him taking this fight is interesting. Since losing the featherweight championship to Lance Palmer back in December 2014, he has won his last 3 fights. Only one of those was in World Series of Fightings. He fought once in Pure FC and also once in VFC 51. I think that might have been that Venator. So he has won 3 fights outside the organization, or 3 fights coming in to fighting in the UFC. Evan Dunham has been on a kind of a nice roll as of late, as he's won, I believe, 3 fights in a row, and definitely a guy with taking on a featherweight should have an advantage. Evan Dunham now actually ranked 15 according to the UFC, overall a record of 16-6, and like I said, he's been on a streak. He's kind of refound himself. At one point, he was kind of the hot prospect in the UFC's lightweight division. Kind of hit some hard times there, took some time off, had some losses there, but now has kind of seemed to kind of figure everything out a little bit here, and has won 3 consecutive fights after getting knocked out by Edson Barboza in July of 2014. In fact, had lost 3 in a row at one point from May of 2013 to July of 2014. Since then, he's beaten the likes of Rodrigo Dam, Ross Pearson, and Joe Lazone. So those are some solid competitors. Now, sure, they're all decisions. He's not doing anything too flashy, but he's beating solid fighters. Now, Rick Glenn, again, up a weight class. You know, he was a big featherweight, so I don't think he's actually giving up as much size as you just look on paper saying, like, oh, this dude used to fight at 45, he's going to be a small 55er. I don't think he's going to be a small 55er by any means. I believe Rick Glenn, pulling up my information now, is, I believe, listed at 5'10". I'm going to double-check that there. But it's a guy, Evan Dunham, is 5'10 as well. So it's not like Rick Glenn's going to be dwarfed by Evan Dunham or anything like that. Yeah, according to Sheerdog, actually Rick Glenn's 6 foot, so actually he was a huge featherweight. So him moving up 10 pounds, again, I don't think should affect him too much. However, how will he deal with a guy like Evan Dunham, who's a very crafty veteran, good ground skills, solid stand-up, and obviously the jitters of debuting in the UFC for the first time. Now, sure, he was in World Series of Fighting. He fought for their title and stuff, so maybe it won't affect him as much as other newcomers. But still, Evan Dunham's a guy that's been around. He knows how to win fights, and that's a tough guy to make your debut against. So it should be an interesting fight. I would look for Evan Dunham to probably try to push the pace, get Glenn up against the cage, and really try to take him down, try to turn this into a dirty fight. Glenn does have some submission skills, but I don't think they surpass what Evan Dunham brings to the table. So I would look for Evan Dunham to really push in the grappling wise. Standing up, I would say they're pretty even, but I don't think Evan Dunham's a fantastic striker, so I would say that makes it more of a 50-50 match, and you add in what should be a height and reach advantage for Glenn. That could definitely sway things in the newcomer's fashion. So if Glenn can keep Dunham off of him, I think he has a very real chance of winning this fight and pulling a big upset and making a splash here in the 155 division. Next fight of the evening will be at 185 pounds, the co-main event of the evening, Derek Brunson against Uriah Hall, a matchup of two top 10 middleweights, big matchup in the division. This fight was actually supposed to take place, I believe, in Germany earlier this year. There were some issues with a visa getting Uriah Hall over to fight in Germany, and then I think Derek Brunson ended up pulling out of the fight anyway. Of course, Hall had a big-time matchup set to go with Anderson Silva in May. Anderson Silva had to pull out just days before the event with the gallbladder surgery. They tried to find somebody else. It didn't work, but Hall gets Brunson, which I think is an equally good matchup. And this one's plain and simple. If Derek Brunson can get this thing to the ground, he can definitely ground and pound and possibly knock out Uriah Hall. But if this thing stays at range, Brunson gets a little reckless with his entry on the takedown, he can get knocked out like that. Uriah Hall is a very electrifying individual and a guy that can knock you out from anywhere inside the octagon. And the thing about Uriah Hall is, when I look at his skill set, he had a bad fight there against Musasio, a bad first round, was able to deal with adversity, come back and get that knockout. And that is something that Derek Brunson's going to have to watch out for, that he can't take his guard off of Uriah Hall for 1 second. If you give him an opening, he can take it and finish you, just like he did Musasi. And that's kind of the X factor in this fight, is that, yeah, even if Brunson takes him down, there's still always that chance that Hall can hit him with a strike and knock him out. But if he's able to stay on his P's and Q's, get on the inside, take this fight to the ground, Hall pretty much offers no resistance off his back, and Brunson may be able to get a victory via ground and pound or at least a decision that way. Main event of the evening, Dustin Poirier against Michael Johnson, a matchup here of two top 10 lightweights. Johnson, of course, lost his last fight in December there to Nate Diaz. Dustin Poirier, since moving up to 155, has been nothing short of fantastic, winning 3 consecutive fights, all by way of knockout. Actually 4 since moving up to 155. All wins against solid opponents, knocking out Diego Ferreira in his debut at 155, then knocking out Yancy Medeiros. He beat the tar there out of Joe Duffy earlier this year at UFC 195, and then absolutely demolished Bobby Green in June of this past year. And it's just incredible how much that 10 pounds difference has helped this kid, who now stands at 20-4 in his career and the number 7th ranked lightweight in the world. However, he's taking on Michael Johnson, who's an extremely strong wrestler, has really developed an excellent stand-up game, really good footwork, good head movement, throws a lot of combinations, he stays very active, and he's a tough dude. He's hard to put away as well. And that wrestling ability, to me, is the X factor. Dustin Poirier, to me, can absolutely stand, throw, and strike with Michael Johnson. However, what will he do when he gets taken down, if he gets taken down? He does have some submission skill. He's put some guys away, but that's usually from the punches setting up the submission, not necessarily being off his back and catching people. So that will be interesting as well. How will he deal with that? And also, this is arguably the best guy he's ever fought at 155. Now, he had some trouble taking on some elite competition at 145. He kind of faltered against the better guys in this division. How will he fare against Michael Johnson, a legitimate 155 contender? That is a real question. So I think if it stays standing, if Michael Johnson doesn't really push the issue with the takedown, I think it's more of a 50-50 fight. Maybe helps Poirier out a little bit. But if Johnson can get on the inside, change things up, change levels, get takedowns, I think he can maybe expose Dustin Poirier at this weight class and show, like, yeah, he can strike with these guys, but he's not ready to wrestle with these guys yet. So as ATT versus Black Zillions, we know there's a rivalry to these two. There's going to be no love lost between these two gentlemen. I think it's an excellent main event. I think it's going to be a great fight wherever it goes, the ground or the feet, and I'm looking forward to it. Let's get to my picks here for UFC Fight Night Hidalgo, starting first in the featherweight division, Chad Skelly against Blanco. I really like Chad Skelly. I like him to bounce back here. He's the bigger guy. I think he'll be able to catch Blanco with something, possibly get a finish. Chris Wade against Islam Makhachev. I like Chris Wade. I don't like the layoff from Makhachev. Chris Wade is a guy that's a very hard worker, and I think he knows what he did wrong. He's a guy that takes this game very seriously, so I think he'll be making adjustments against a similar opponent like his last fight against Khabib and get the victory here over Islam. Owen Canero against Kenny Robertson. This one's a very evenly matched fight. Obviously, the jiu-jitsu game goes to Canero, but I'm going to go with Kenny Robinson here. I think he'll be able to keep it standing, make it more of a 50 fight, maybe eke out a decision here in Texas. Evan Dunham against Rick Glenn. I really like Rick Glenn. I think he's going to make this fight closer than people think. However, Evan Dunham's the guy on the roll. He's really been fighting really smart and intelligently lately, so I'm going to go with Evan Dunham to keep the winning track going. Uriah Hall against Derek Brunson. I probably should be taking Derek Brunson, but I'm going to go Uriah Hall. I think Brunson sometimes can get wild and reckless. He may be looking to something prove Hall to show that he can strike with one of the best, and maybe that'll be a bad idea for him, and Hall will catch him with something and knock him out. So I'm going to go with Uriah Hall. I think even though he's the higher-ranked guy, I think it's maybe a little bit of an upset. Dustin Poirier against Michael Johnson. I'm going to go Michael Johnson. I think the wrestling ability of Johnson is something to look out for, and I think he will try it at some point. And I'm not sure how Dustin will do against a wrestler here at 155. I think that's a question that needs to be answered. I'm not sure if he's ready to answer it quite yet, so I'm going to go with Michael Johnson to win this one. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody who supports Beyond the Cage. Again, subscribing right here on YouTube, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast, and follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Like to thanks to people, MMAforlife.ca, MMAinsider.net, MMA Fight Club on Facebook, themmmacommunity.com, excellent forums, Gorilla the Bear, excellent friend and artist, MMA-inspired artwork. Check him out at Gorilla the Bear on Instagram and Twitter. Flying Brian J, always supporting the show, as well as Legends of the Cage, supporting Beyond the Cage as well. Am I missing anybody? Of course, we're on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, YouTube, anywhere, and the Stitcher mobile app. You can listen to Beyond the Cage as well. So, until next week, thanks again for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.